were just talking about Vegas. Is it your sense that Vegas is probably the team to beat on Mitch Marner here?
It just feels like it's the most Vegas thing, doesn't it? I mean, that's what Vegas does. I mean, they're always out to look. I was critical of them a few years back, especially with all the Petrangelo thing, when that stuff was going on, and other players they went out and got even prior to him. It just felt like every star player that was available. It was like the shiny toy at Christmas. They had to have him. But I've talked to Kelly McCrimmon about this, in the past. Listen, I give them credit, especially after winning a Stanley Cup and hearing from players who play there how well they're treated and how much they love being there. Now, there isn't always a lot of loyalty to a certain number of guys, who felt like they would be there longer than they were, and maybe some were promised certain things. Marc-Andre Fleury being one of those. But hey, listen, when you talk to the players and they talk about how they're treated, how the families are treated, how the wives are treated, they've got a good thing going. So this feels like a very Vegas thing. Not to mention that I think they want the player. They like the player. They feel like he'd be a good fit. I mean, they've got some stuff they've got to figure out in terms of, ways to fit him in from a cap standpoint, most notably Alex Petrangelo's situation. And it sounds like, from what I understand, he's not going to play, so that money is going to be available. I look at a couple different teams for Mitch Marner, and I focus mostly out west. And I think Anaheim is the other team that can really sneak up and grab a guy like Mitch Marner. I think Joel Quenneville's got a lot of juice there in terms of his ability to recruit. You've got some other players too. It'd be a comfortable spot for a guy like Mitch. I mean, you talk about going from Toronto to Anaheim. They're an up-and-coming team. They're trying to build. Pat Verbeek's got a lot of credibility, too, in terms of, him speaking like a player, knowing how to speak that language to players from a recruiting standpoint. So I just look at those two teams, man. I mean, Utah obviously is a team that's been mentioned as well. Maybe they can, get it done. But I look at Vegas and I look at Anaheim as two teams that I wouldn't be surprised if Marner ended up at either of them.
Yeah, and Andy, I'm with you too. Again, I think there's a lot of appeal too of going to the West, right? You're going to somebody like a sunny state, and you've been in Toronto, you've dealt with winters, and you're getting away from that, like being in that market. But that being said, like you were, first to officially report Marner going to Toronto. Like obviously a big deal. How do we get there? How did you? I know you got the inside. I know you've been at this a long time, but how do we get to that point?
Well, just by happenstance, to be honest with you, just talking to different people, obviously, who are, in the know, that would certainly have an idea. And, it's one of those things, Huts, where I even asked a few people, even prior to putting it out there, because I don't like putting stuff out there that's already out there. You know what I'm saying? And I don't know. Yeah. I'm not reading Twitter 24/7. Right, I'm doing this for a long time, and I feel like I've generated enough relationships and people who I know that I just talk to on a regular basis, more so than out trying to get the scoop all the time. Sometimes you're just having that conversation with people who obviously work in the business. But I don't follow everybody's reports out of Toronto. And I didn't want to put that out there if this was already, world news that everyone already knew about. Although I did talk to a number of people who said, hey, we kind of already figured this was the case anyway. So it was kind of an innocent tweet. I thought it would get a lot of attention. I didn't think it would get nearly as much as attention as it did, which is fine. I mean, I'll take that from that standpoint. But, I mean, that was confirmation that I received, that particular day that he wasn't going back to Toronto. I don't know if that communication had been made to the team already at that point. But, I mean, just based on the feedback that you got from fans and other people in terms of how loud the news was after that came out, I don't think people fully expected that soon in the offseason. I think the overwhelming majority of people were thinking that he would, take his name into July 1, see what kind of offers were out there. And I think a lot of people felt like, hey, he would circle back to Toronto and say, this is the offers that I'm getting. Now let's see if we can get there. But I really don't believe this is about Mitch Marner trying to get the most money. I've said that several times. I think this is about him wanting a change of scenery, living in a different market, not dealing with as much noise that he deals with from playing in Toronto. And I don't put a blanket over all Toronto fans, but obviously there's, some stuff that's been going on behind the scenes where, from what I'm being told, he's had to have police presence outside of his house because of some of the threats that have been made. Listen, nobody wants to live like that. There's other great places to live. Hutz, you know this as well as anybody, because I hear a lot of former players saying, why wouldn't you want to play in Toronto? This is the greatest place to live. There's a lot of great places to live in the NHL. It's the National Hockey League. and you're still treated like an NHLer in other markets, believe it or not. People don't want to believe that. There's some great places to play throughout the NHL. This guy has never lived outside of Ontario his entire life. He grew up in Toronto, played junior hockey in London, as you know. Obviously, he's drafted by the Maple Leafs. He's been there his entire career. I don't blame him for wanting to do something different. And if that means experience a different lifestyle, he's got a family now, take it out west, good situation for his kids to be able to get into schools and great weather and all of that. And a chance to come up with a young team like Anaheim if he were to go in that direction, or have a chance to win with a team like Vegas. I think this guy really wants to win. And, he's also looking to do it, somewhere else outside of Toronto and get away from a lot of the noise and the distraction that he's been dealing with. Not to say that he hasn't created some of that either, because sometimes he's part of that, right? He's created some of that distraction and a lot of that noise by not helping that team get over the hump. But it is what it is.
Yeah, that's my sense too. I think he's just tired of the bullshit, and I just wanted to add too that I'm right there with you. Like, it's one thing to be critical of a player as a media member or as a fan, but there's a line. You can't step over that line. You got to remember it's fucking sports, okay? People like I just don't understand how you get to a level where there's death threats to a player. Like, I think people have to keep that in mind and keep that in check. But from the Marner standpoint, so what is he after? Like, I mean, there's been so much speculation out there. Is it a short-term deal? Is it a long-term deal? A state tax situation? Do you have anything else to add sort of on the Marner front, what he's looking for here in free agency?
Well, if he's going to Anaheim, he's not looking for state tax, So, how
True.
much money do you need where the state tax, becomes an issue? I mean, this guy's going to get paid big time money regardless. But people have always thrown out the $14 million number. I don't think he's after that $14 million number or trying to become the highest paid player in the game. I think everyone would understand that Connor McDavid deserves to be that guy. And, once he signs his contract, he's going to be the highest paid player. And he shouldn't make more than Leon Draisaitl, who's going to be making $14 million. His contract kicks in next season. So, I think you got to use a realistic approach. And a lot of people have thrown that out there thinking, okay, I'm just going to go to any team that's going to pay me $14 million plus, whether it be Carolina or somewhere else. That's the main attraction. He can do whatever he wants to do. If he's going to make 12.5 to 13.5 million, somewhere in that range, and he wants to do a short-term deal and then explore free agency again 2, 3, 4 years down the road, I've got no problem with that. Guys who are making that type of money have that luxury and that advantage where they can make that decision, where other players obviously have to take the longest term that they can get because there is no guarantee that they're even going to be in the league 5, 6 years from now, or how they're going to be able to perform. Injury obviously can come into play as well. But I think when you're a guy like Mitch Marner, who's made as much money as he's made, I think he's going to be able to command the level of salary that he's going to get this offseason, then he has some options. So I'm sure a variety of concepts are going to be presented to him, anywhere from 2 years to 4 years, all the way up to 8 years in an effort to keep him there long term.
Yeah, and rightfully so. I guess I'd be one of those players that I was always looking for term, right? Because I didn't know I was always worried the next year I was going to have a seat at the table, right? And I knew if I got term, it was the best thing for me, right? But that being said, Sam Bennett, what a run, right? Like, how likely is it he goes to Florida? I know you reported last week in Toronto that Bennett's agent said, like, Toronto's not on that destination list. Like, he's worried. I don't know if he doesn't want to go there and be part of that. But that being said, like, do you think Florida can retain him?
I do. And I think that's their number one priority, is to keep Sam Bennett. And he doesn't want to leave. I think when you've won back-to-back Stanley Cups, there's emotion that's involved in it. Obviously, he's the Conn Smythe winner, which, only helps his, status inside that market. People trying to poke fun at how many people are at the parade and whatnot, depending on what, image you're getting. Some images it looks like, there's, 1 million people there. Some images it looks like there's, 500 people there. But who cares, man? They're the best team in the league. Florida's never going to be Toronto. They're never going to be Chicago, Boston. Even when the Blues won the Cup in 2019, I've never seen anything like it in terms of the number of people. It doesn't matter how much fan support they have, man. These guys are loving life, playing in South Florida, playing in the NHL. So there's a marriage there, and there's no doubt that, there's a deal to be made. I know people were throwing out $10 million and a lot of crazy salaries and numbers attached to Sam Bennett, but at the end of the day, everyone takes a deep breath and really comes to the realization of what you're getting, which would be a guy who can put up 50 points in a season. He's a second-line center. I mean, listen, those guys aren't going to make, $10 million a year. It's just not the reality of it. But I think he can get somewhere close to 8, if not north of 8, probably under 8.5, But still, when you translate that to a bigger market with a heavy tax, obviously it gets, it equals a 10, $11 million salary somewhere else. So he's going to be paid well. He's going to be, get the term that he's looking for as well. And when you look at where Sam Bennett came from, who he was when he was in Calgary, where they pretty much, gave him away. He was a healthy scratch down the stretch during his time in Calgary, couldn't find a real role. Now he's got a role. He's got status there. He's part of a winning team. He doesn't want to leave, and they don't want to lose him. So he's going to stay there in Florida.
And just piggybacking off Hutz's question, was Toronto even a discussion point with the agent and the player, or is it just something he just wanted no part of?
I don't think he wanted any part of it. I don't think he had his eye on any Canadian teams, to be honest with you. That was never really something, from what I understand, that he was, looking to explore, or get to free agency and end up being in Canada. But I can't tell you, Toronto was never a team that he was going to go to. I mean, listen, these guys have obviously played Toronto in the playoffs. And I'm not anti-Toronto, man. I don't want to come across like that. I mean, I was in Toronto in early May. I love Toronto. I love the fact that they're so passionate about the game, and there's so much history there with hockey. I think sometimes we get caught up in not understanding that there are a lot of other options for these players nowadays to go live and play elsewhere and not deal with a lot of the extracurricular that you're going to have to deal with. Listen, Toronto's great. If you're winning, I'm sure it's a great situation. If you're a star player, I'm sure it's a great situation until it's not. When you can't get it done in the playoffs and you're taking a lot of heat and you're taking some criticism, that's not for everybody. And I know people bring up the Dougie Gilmores and the Wendell Clarks and all these guys and, Shane Corsons. We've had all these guys on my podcast that I do with Cam Jansen. We've had long conversations with these guys about that. They didn't deal with a lot of the stuff that these players are dealing with today, especially when you look at social media and everything else that comes with it. And there's been heavy expectations with this particular group of players, and they haven't been able to get it done. So Sam Bennett knew he was going to have plenty of options. I just don't think Toronto or any Canadian teams were part of that.
No, yeah, and I agree with you, Andy. I remember when I first kind of came in the league, it was social media wasn't huge. So if we'd go to a bar, no one really knew who you were, right? Unless you told people. Mm-hmm. And then it got to the point where everyone knows who you are, right? And it's magnified in those markets. But that being said, would Patrick Kane be a guy that the Leafs could consider, where he's at, and obviously his status? He wants to win. He might take a friendly deal. You know how much money he's made over his career.
100%. And, he's a guy that wants to win again. So he's going to weigh his options based on which teams give him the best chance to win. Is that a player at this stage of his career that is going to get Toronto over the hump? I'm not so sure he is. Listen, Kane can still get streaky. I saw him like a throwback Patrick Kane, and then there's games where you watch him play, and if he's not on the power play, he looks like an aging player who's no longer at the level at the from the player we saw from his heyday in Chicago when they were winning Stanley Cups. And it is what he is, or what it is. I mean, he's an older player. He's not going to be that guy. But I think Toronto, they've got money to spend. We'll see what happens with Tavares, because who knows how that's going to play out either. They're going to have to. Everyone keeps talking about team-friendly deals and trying to get players on the cheap. I mean, listen, when you're handing out the money to these guys initially, now you think you're going to get them on the cheap. I just don't know how realistic that is. People look at the Brock Nelson contract. I think Tavares is a better player than Nelson, to be honest with you. Tavares is a no-maintenance guy. He's quietly been producing the last handful of years. He's been scoring goals. He scores more goals than I think people realize, too. Why should he take less than Brock Nelson? If Colorado's going to get Brock Nelson, who's a year younger, $7.5 million. If I'm John Tavares, I'm not taking less than Brock Nelson. Although family considerations come into play, I don't know him personally, so I don't know what he's looking to do from a family standpoint. If the wife doesn't want to leave, if the kids are all set up in their activities and schools and whatnot, that's important to players. But you can't pay him what you've been paying him the last several years and then expect him to sign some lowball offer after he's been producing. I don't see it like that. But Patrick Kane, man, I could see him in blue and white, and the fans loving him. I don't know if that makes him a stronger contender than they were going into last season if they had Kane. But they're going to have money to spend, and they're going to have to replace these players. I think the trade market is where they're going to have to find a way to be creative. And that's what the best general managers are able to do. And they're able to fill spots through evaluating talent around the league, utilizing your pro scouting staff to improve your roster. And that's what they're going to have to find a way to do. It can't just be free agency and going and buying players. Look at the free agency list as it is right now. If Marchand stays in Florida, if Bennett stays in Florida, what are we looking at? I mean, I know there's some names and we want to have fun on free agency, but how many of these players are truly going to be franchise game changers that are going to really get you closer to winning a Stanley Cup? I don't see too many guys out there who can do that.
It has to be the trade market. And to your point, I think you cover a really, really great GM in St. Louis and Doug Armstrong, who, of course, is going to hand the reins off, it seems, in a year from now. But I wanted to ask you about that sort of relationship, and we'll get to Craig Berube. But the Braden Shen conversation is unique and obviously interesting, too. Like, what can you tell us, putting back the curtain to what transpired throughout the season in regards to Braden Shen? And we all know the Leafs are poking around at the trade deadline, too. Do you think he's a guy who's available right now?
Well, the mindset of the organization changed from prior to the trade deadline to where we are right now. I mean, when you look at where they were at, prior to the trade deadline, no one thought they were going to make the playoffs. Colton Parayko gets hurt the last game they played prior to the trade deadline. And, nobody expected that. I'll tell you, Jim Montgomery was a big part of saying, hey, let's keep this team together. Let's not lose our captain. And let's still try to take a run at this. They just got Cam Fowler, who ended up being, a huge piece of this team. I don't know where they would have been without him. Certainly wouldn't have made the playoffs if they didn't make that deal. And getting out in front of the trade deadline and acquiring a guy like Fowler for, a second-round pick or whatever they ended up giving up for him. Jeremy Biaka-Batuka. Remember Biaka-Batuka? I think his uncle was a running back back in the day for Michigan. Same family. Yeah. But that was just basically a throw-in just so they could get to the number of contracts that you're allowed to have in your organization. They had to move out of players. So they basically got Cam Fowler for nothing. But listen, there were other players inside the dressing room who Braden Shen is tight with. And listen, he is truly the captain. I mean, he's got a lot of respect inside that dressing room. He's tight with a lot of players. And there were other players whose names were also quietly being mentioned as potentially trade deadline moves who also had no trade clauses. And they were telling Braden Shen, hey, if you're going to go, then I'm going to go too. If you're staying, then I'm staying. It was almost like a package deal with a couple of these guys. And, they made the right decision. They hung on to him. Shen had a great finish to the season. He was good in the playoffs. We all know what he brings to the table in terms of character. But they also want to, push him down the lineup a little bit and make the team a little bit deeper, have him as a third-line center versus forcing him up the food chain as a second-line center. Doesn't kill penalties, though. Typically you want your bottom six forwards to be able to, impact special teams or have a role on special teams. So he can certainly still do that and get his minutes on the power play, but he's not a PK guy. And that's why I think Michael Granlund is their number one person of interest right now here in St. Louis. If they can get their hands on him, bring him into the fold as a second-line center. They've got Dalibor Dvorsky, who they drafted a few years back, 10th overall. As a 19-year-old last year playing in the American Hockey League, had over 20 goals. I mean, you just don't see too many teenagers produce at that level in the American League. This would give a little more time for him to kind of breathe a little bit and develop a little bit longer, unless he really blows everybody's socks off here in training camp and finds a way to make the team. But if you had Thomas and Granlund and Shen as your top three centers, then they're still talking to Fox about trying to bring him back, see if they can get that done and have him back in place as your fourth-line center. I think they like their depth up the middle. They'd like to improve the right side of their defense as well. That may have to happen via trade versus, free agency. I know people talk about Ekblad. I talked to a lot of people. There's a lot of varying opinions on Ekblad in terms of his ability to play at a high level and defend. I mean, we see him at his best, and he's surrounded by a lot of great players, but doesn't have the best feet. And there's some issues there, I think, some concerns. So, what's he willing to take in Toronto versus what is he going to command in the open market? So I don't know if that's a real option. Then you get down to the Cody Cece's and some of these guys on the right side. So your best option to improve your team on the right side may be via trade. But Granlund's the number one option. It doesn't look like Shen's going anywhere right now. Now, Luke Shen's a completely another question. Who knows what's going to happen with him there in Winnipeg? I didn't feel like he loved the situation there. He's got a family. And, maybe that wasn't a great fit for he and his family moving forward in Winnipeg. So I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And if we could see Winnipeg potentially move Luke Shen, but I think Braden Shen, the Blues captain, he's got such a great relationship with the players and the head coach here. Obviously, he won a Stanley Cup with Alexander Steen as well. I just don't see him going anywhere now.
No, and I'm with you, Andy. I got a chance to play with Braden. I know him really well. He's such a great guy, right?
Yeah.
Like he's a guy that just everyone wants around, whether it's management. And again, even if his game starts to drop off, you want him around your players. And that being said, I got a chance to play for Chief. He was the assistant when I was there, Mike Yeo. And then obviously Yeo, we know what happened with Chief, wins a Stanley Cup. What did you think of Chief's year, Craig Berube, in Toronto this year?
Well, listen, I think it's a little bit different for him. I mean, he doesn't like a lot of the extracurricular. I mean, Chief is the definition of a hockey guy. He wants to go to the rink, he wants practice, and then he wants to watch tape. He wants to watch hockey at night and eat wings and hang out with his coaching staff. That's what he's all about. So he's not into a lot of the extracurricular, like I said, and a lot of the attention that, obviously comes with Toronto. But he knew what he was signing up for at the same time. Otherwise, he wouldn't have taken the job, But I think he handled everything really well in terms of dealing with the media and some of the questions that you're going to get asked, the same questions every single day. I mean, you know how it is here, Carter. I mean, it's a much different climate. I mean, there's days on off days where maybe you have 2 or 3 reporters at a practice, maybe a television station. But if it's a couple days before a game, you're not even going to have a TV station there, maybe a couple beat writers. So it's different, and you can get to know Chief really well, and you can sit down, and he'll sit down, and you'll have conversations and hot stove it and talk about things that are going around, around the NHL. You see him out at night at different bars. He's not hiding, So it was a comfortable situation for him. I think he loved it here, but I also think he loves the situation that he's in Toronto because he's got so much respect for the game and the history of the game, and he knows what's at stake. And if he's able to deliver in a market like Toronto, the rest of his life will be absolutely made. He's got a great opportunity ahead of him. I don't think he saw himself coming into the job and then losing Marner and potentially Tavares after the first year there. I think he thought he was going to have these guys for more than a year, so we'll see how that plays out. But I think he handled himself just fine, man. They won the division, and if you look at Florida, how they played the rest of the playoffs, I don't think anybody played them tougher than Toronto. They were right there with them. They beat a good, hungry, young Ottawa team, obviously, in the first round. So I think it's something they can build towards. And a lot of the issues that stood out under previous coaching staffs when they lost, I didn't get the same sense of frustration this go around.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Roseau. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.